8:56 p.m. on May 18th, 2014. This is an Immediacy Data Intelligence report for the remainder of the month of May and into June. However, I've got a report. We do have some short and longer term data now. We've gotten a couple of the other servers back online, supporting their spiders, their web bots, and so we've got a bit more data to work with. None of it good, I'll tell you that right up front. It's going to be a very nasty little report here. I'm going to try and keep it as short as I can. We've got all kinds of things going on and need the time, to be honest. So let's just get right into it. Let's start off. We've got bad numbers at a government level are going to lead to a revolving door effect here, it says, in the sense that it looks as though parts of the government U.S. GUS that are involved in the acquisition and dissemination of numeric data at a federal level, the aggregation of that. So maybe it's like Bureau of Labor and Statistics, I don't know. But in those kind of jobs, there appears to either be a wholesale layoff or a big exodus. A lot of people are going to be responding to the bad numbers within their jobs by leaving those jobs. This all at a federal government level. It could be referencing political kind of people as well as civil servants, but there's specifically civil servant attachments to it. These job separations at the federal level, which may include or may not the political, are also coinciding with layoff language that will be visible within even the mainstream media, as apparently a lot of the mainstream media is going to get laid off as well. Now, this is these data sets are arising out of an immediacy data set that is getting accretion of supporting sets through both short and long-term data sets. It's coincident with the economy rolling over, but apparently there's going to be these layoffs as a temporal marker ahead of that. The economy rolling over part of it is cross-linked into housing falling apart and a big dollar sell-off. Now, a quick sketch here, a little verbal sketch. In spite of whatever kind of pictures I end up showing on the YouTube video component of this, here's a little verbal sketch of what the data is describing, applied to sort of a calendar. It's showing a very nasty end of May, a very nasty June, housing just going into the point of non-deniability, with high visibility within the mainstream media. And the non-deniability is all about basically another housing crash, prices, lack of ability for people to buy, and it's going to hit a couple of very large rental companies really hard, and we're going to see that they're going to start trying to lobby for basically a bailout, that they're stuck with all these rentals that they can't unload, and so they want the government to bail them out. These are temporal markers about the economy rolling over and leading up to a period of this, I guess, dumping of the dollar. And all kinds of dollar assets by the foreigners, those people outside the United States. A lot of them are going to be United States corporations too, but the largest group, of course, will be foreign holders of U.S. debt. Now, that's going to start in November. That's going to catch a lot of people by surprise because they don't expect it to show up until 2015. But we've got data here pointing clearly to November. Now, we could be wrong. There's no question about that. But our November data set is well supported. It has 5 layers of internal support and a lot of cross-links about the temporal markers that are leading up to the period that we're seeing in place now, but also we have the ability to, in shifting model space forward, to see that it's actually going to occur sometime in November. Now, this is going to be, again, coincident with all kinds of stuff in terms of stuff for the planet and politics and money and all kinds of other sort of things. But so we've got a bad May, end of May. We've got a worse June with bad housing stuff. We've got a very terrible July because there's going to be all kinds of nasty stuff in July. But economically, it's going to be bad as well, to the point where the refrain from the people trying to alibi the poor economy in July will shift back to climate and weather. And we'll get more into that in a minute. And it's going to be a very interesting August, a very fraught with upset. There could be a lot of people claiming of some kind of a fraud setup at a very high level. This is going to taint the USA political administration, apparently at both parties. It's going to spread quite wide, and it's going to taint them at a level that we'll see a bunch of resignations. I don't know if the resignations come in August or not. The scandal appears to break then. Let's see. Okay, and so that's all about the economy. Hey, the economy is rolling over, leading up to this dollar dumping by foreigners that begins in November, which basically, I guess we can say, we're also looking, if we want to look at the same calendar of May through to November, we're looking at your food prices creeping up at 2 and 3 and 4 and 5%, maybe 10 and 20% on individual items, depending on what they are, because of how the dollar is being received overseas. So you might see all of a sudden a real increase in beluga caviar, for instance, right? Because the Russians don't want to take dollars and they want real currency. And so you got to pay with something. And so all of a sudden beluga caviar goes up 80, 90%. But in a general sense, grocery items and these kind of things will be escalating at a rate of 2 and 3 and 4% per month over this period of time between November before the hyperinflation hits. And that really hits in... it looks like the end of the first week in November. We'll be able to adjust that as we get more data here. But at this point, that's where we really have the tipping point. The tipping point is the death of the dollar, it turns out, the final, climatic end of it as people around the planet start dumping it, including U.S. citizens. Lots of howls of rage. The good news for the powers that be is that the weather's going to be just so stinking bad across the planet in the northern hemisphere, especially in the eastern corridor in November, in this late fall and winter of 2014 and early 2015, that there is going to be a real struggle to survive, let alone get enough energy and ire up to go and attack the power structure. So the power structure kind of like gets a break according to our data here. Not to say that they're going to be skating or any of that. It's just that there isn't going to be wholesale revolution this year. So anyway, and a lot of it's going to be due to the weather. People are going to be really pissed in November when basically the dollar decides to be, the people decide that they're going to flush their dollar holdings and really dump the things en masse in such a way that all of a sudden chaos enters into the picture on a daily basis. And we will all there will be a sudden turning to books like Dmitry Orlov's, book on 5 stages of collapse, that kind of deal. Only people in the United States won't have the money to buy it because it'll be too damned expensive. All of a sudden it'll cost, $2,000 and $3,000 to acquire a copy of his book. It's going to be that horrific. I mean, I'm laughing simply because I'm male and stupid and crazy. and it strikes me as funny that it's finally all here. And we're getting data about such things as book sales and people being really frustrated and break-ins at Amazon warehouses and such. Yeah, Amazon, you got break-ins coming. I don't think for that though. I don't know that they're breaking in for Dmitry Orlov's book. It looks like it's part of this a few incidents of rioting and that kind of thing that occur in the course of winter in some areas where the weather is not quite as bad as in others. Anyway, the dollar sell-off, the dollar dumping goes from bad to really, really, really bad decay fairly rapidly, such that the little bit of long-term data we have backing up the short-term data shows that by January of 2015, there is basically political chaos within the former American empire as the economic reality slaps everybody in the face. So there's that part of it. All right, so hey, let's get on to some bad news. All right, well, actually, let's stop for a minute and look at some good news. As an aside, coincident with and in lockstep with all of the degradation of the dollar economy from the rest of 2014, with an emphasis on May, June, July, August, and September, we have a set of data for silver and gold that are suggesting that they'll be moving in a stepwise fashion upwards. That they're going to be meeting some hard resistance, but at the same time, each and every step is going to be solid. It's going to form a base for the next step. It doesn't appear that there's going to be anything really spectacular again until November. November is when we might start seeing the really rapid degradation of the dollar to the point that we're getting the $20 to $100 a day moves in the price of silver. And I'll try and come back to housing as relates to that as well in a minute. Okay, so we've got the stepping of gold and silver prices, the breakdown of the fixing process globally for all the metals, including gold and platinum and this kind of thing. It's going to occur very rapidly. Data is showing that that'll work itself out over probably mostly the month of June, such that there's something that goes on that when silver hits its real big step, maybe as early as July, I don't know. It'll be followed fairly shortly by gold, because gold will no longer behave as the powers that be would want it to. Okay, now the Terra entity stuff we've got is not good either. Okay, it's showing that the northern hemisphere is going to be plagued by 24 volcanoes that are going to be quite active and quite serious. Hang on, I got to go shift my old dog here. He's about to fall off his bed. Okay, dog butt having been rescued from a 4-inch slide to the floor, we can proceed here. So we've got this thing saying 24. Frequently in our data sets we get numeric representations as numerals spelled out in the language, like 13 all spelled out, or 14, that kind of thing. Mostly those numeric representations are valuable but inaccurate. They have a tendency to let us know that it's going to be more than one, that the number might be significant, and that sort of thing. Rarely do we get the references to groups where the groups are specific, as in a dozen. Mostly in terms of descriptors for groups, they'll be terms of few or many, these kinds of more vague words. So the fact that we have a descriptor at a dozen, I'm not going to say that we're going to end up with exactly 24, but it does apparently seem to suggest that we'll be able to count these in a dozen at a time in these two or three clusters. That these volcanoes are going to become active. Most of them appear to be under the sea. There does appear to be a pulsing or a magma flow issue that affects North America. I'm not going to suggest that we're going to get a volcano that's going to go off, but certainly there appears to be a lot of language about just that kind of an event. Now, let me suggest, though, that we do have some long-term data that goes out until 2017 and 18, suggesting there's going to be a very large earthquake in the Pacific Northwest. And I happen to think that that's going to be coincident with one or more very large volcanic explosions around here. So what we may be getting at this stage, because there's no termination point on this data for the Terra entity here and the 24 volcanoes, I suspect that it's the beginning of that process that will lead us through these next few years, and we'll end up with some kind of very large earthquake and volcanic explosion here in the Pacific Northwest. Now, the volcanoes that we've got listed, the data sets that we've got highlighted here for the 24 volcanoes are actually going in a kind of a weird process as you move the data sets forward, or move model space forwards. Data sets acquire or lose, that is to say, they don't lose it, they just simply stop gaining supporting sets. So this data set is not heartening to watch as it goes through model space, because it continues to gain supporting sets under all of these little sets indicating nasty reactions from volcanoes. Much of the volcanic activity that apparently is going to occur in the near term, as is referenced by the immediacy in the short-term data, seems to suggest it's going to be more of the idea of smoke across the water, and that we'll end up with some kind of Russian volcano or some kind of Pacific volcano subsea that may break the sea surface in such a manner that we end up with volcanic smoke that comes into North America. It appears it's going to come in through the Alaska Loop, go down over Canada, and settle in on bits and pieces of North America, not necessarily the West Coast. So that seemed to suggest Kamchatka as an origination point, given the current weather conditions and so on. We'll see how accurate that is. However, the longer-term growth of this data set all the way through 2014, and when I push it out to the little bit of long-term data that I've got at the moment, shows that we're moving into a period of transformation of the planet, that is to say the planet beneath our feet, Terra, and much of this transformation is going to be coming through the form of fire. So by the time we reach 2015 and let's just say the beginning of spring there, because our data really dribbles down to nothing worth looking at after that. I've only got the 2 servers going on the long-term stuff at the moment, so it'll take a while to build back up. Anyway, so about to the end of, in terms of specific references, I'd say maybe the 3rd week in January, I'd really start becoming hesitant after that to put too much credence into the data we've got. But by that period, we should have seen some of the volcanic activity arise. So we're looking at, over the course of the rest of this year, another 6 months or so, these 24 volcanoes starting to indicate their presence is much more active. Now, a lot of that, as I said, a lot of the supporting sets for that don't indicate any kind of an eruption at the moment, but there are all kinds of supporting sets for cracks, for lahars, for movement under mountains, for further sinkholes, and also for something that we're going to have to call a long-running sink, okay? Or maybe we'll call it a slink or something, I don't know. But these are going to be sink lines or sink runs rather than sink holes. They're not going to be as a result of water mains bursting, but that's what it's going to look like in some places, because they'll be long-running cave-ins. And some will be quite significant. These slinks, or these long-running sinkholes, are going to end up with some notoriety. We'll find out what they're going to be named by the end of the year. There's going to be a new word that's going to have to be created for this phenomena. They're going to be quite devastating in some areas, because in at least 2 areas, I think, separated by half a planet, but I don't know. But the 2 areas are both politically significant. We have those designators, and their projects are politically significant, and their projects are going to go into the toilet and get flushed, because these slinks are going to tear up the ground, and so they won't be able to have giant pipelines and crap. I know it sounds absurd, but the data set, and we're not even to the space coat part area yet. Sorry guys, it's running longer than I thought. I want to keep these things to 11 minutes, but anyway. So just to try and finish up, these long-running sinkhole slinks, or whatever the hell we want to call them, are showing as interfering with 2 very politically sensitive and environmentally sensitive projects. Both of the projects appear to be pipeline or energy related. Also, there's a subset within here indicating that the slinks are going to cause termination problems for nuclear plants. If that's the case, then I can say that the further subset within that area points to some kind of a river changing course or being drained. And it looks to be in the southeast, and it looks like the river will lose 5 or 6 inches in such a way that it'll uncover lead-in tubes for a nuke plant and cause something of a crisis. That appears to be late in the year. I don't know if we don't have a firm correlation between some of the data sets as they arise and major temporal markers, such as the dollar sell-off, which we can peg pretty clearly into November at this point. So I'm tempted to think that this slink causing the river to drain or change, leading to the nuke plant stuff, it does appear to arrive in enough strength ahead of that I can say it probably is an August, September, October kind of a thing rather than November, December. But that's the best I can do at this point, because I'm working with short-term data and not a lot of immediacy data in support of that. We're too far away. Okay, so Terra is going to have a rough time of it over the next few years. We're about to jumpstart that rough time, just like we're jumpstarting a car with 2 bad cylinders. It's going to be out of 4. It's going to be a really rocky and bangy sort of ride from that point on. Apparently, we will improve. We're going to go through a transformation process. The negative part of that is the transformation process appears to involve a whole lot of fire, and take that seriously in Europe as well, guys. You guys are going to see smoke on the waters and gambling halls burning, all of that there as well. Now, going on to Space Goat Farts, because I got to wrap this up. I've got a lot of other work to do. We've got a couple of weird data sets for Space Goat Farts indicating that there may be something of a breakthrough in emotional context around Space Goat Farts prior to the tipping point of the dollar sell-off in November. The breakthrough may be not disclosure as we would think of it, because it's not going to be the powers that be running around saying, oh, look at the funny aliens. Hey, here's Bob. He works down in, and he just so happens to be from Arcturus. No, rather what we're showing here is there's going to be some kind of an event that's going to create a whole lot of confusion. So let's just say it's going to be another one of those swirly things, and so we could say swirly thing alert. Like the swirly thing that hit Norway when O'Droner guy was up there getting that peace prize from the Dynamite King. And so this is definitely a swirly thing alert. And the swirly thing alert, the swirly thing, when it shows up, is going to cause all kinds of confusion, global confusion, not only in the propagandists, but also in the internet's active alternative media. Going to be all kinds of interpretations, millions of them, and so probably 10 or 12 of them will be accurate and all the rest will be wrong. So let's not get hung up in interpretations about the swirly thing for a while, because the swirly thing is going to lead to, for those of us that are paying attention, to apparently, as described by our data sets, sort of like let's call it a sky or a space mirror, in the sense that we'll be able to, for a brief period of time, following the swirly thing, or as a result of, or during the swirly thing, realize that we're being observed, and be able to see, to some extent, those who are doing the observing. So let me just make it into a really crude visual description, just to give you an idea of what we're getting out of some of the immediacy data sets. A very simplified textual description of this would include something along the lines of a giant swirly thing shows up in the mid-Atlantic to where it can be seen by a very large percentage of the population. It's also significantly videotaped by a number of different points of reference. And all this happens during a chaotic weather period of time, and at that same period of time, for whatever reason, lightning or other lighting issues, we see that off in the clouds, watching us watch the swirly thing is something hanging up there. And it causes itself a bunch of confusion. But the swirly thing causes a lot of confusion, and then the subsequent realization that we were being observed, and maybe the swirly thing was a, like an attractant you might give to a cat, like, the little laser you have the cat chase, that kind of thing, the little red light. And so that leads to this period of time where we've now got on the plate under real serious discussion before the end of this year, the fact that humanity is being observed. And if you think people are paranoid now, you ain't seen nothing yet. So it's going to get really fun as a result of this. I'm going to just wrap it up at that and say, sorry, you guys. Sorry it's so long. And we're really in for it, all of us poor bastards. Sorry for the language. Take it easy, guys. We'll have another report in a few days. All kinds of things going on here. Igor shifted some of the servers, but now he's got to head back to his old base and pick up a bunch more. So it might be 2 to 3 weeks. We'll just see how the data flow goes. I'm going to try for whatever we've got at the end of this coming week, barring any other option. And just as a personal aside, if there's anybody listening to these reports who is in southern Germany or Austria, who's a Bitcoin expert, and perhaps is a native German speaker, German L1, maybe you could send me an email at Moon, at my domain there. I might have an introduction that where you could benefit some people who might need some assistance with some Bitcoin. Thank you very much, guys. End of the week, if not earlier. Bye.